Our guest on this edition of CityWide is Mark Green, the former New York City public advocate, current host of the nationally syndicated radio program Both Sides Now with Arianna Huffington and Mary Matalin. Now, Both Sides Now sounds like there's two people. That show seems to have three. Tell us about this show.
I started about a year and a half ago, and I was bored of this monolithic, one-sided, strident radio, right and left, although conservatives dominate 90% of talk on radio. And so I brought together two women and two sides. Arianna is very liberal, famous because of the Huffington Post. Mary Matalin was in the Bush-Cheney White House as CNN contributor. And I'm the moderator. Of course, you would say, laugh and go, you're the immoderator.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's one of the only times on media, certainly on radio, that every issue, let's say this week it's Greece, the vote next week on does life begin its conception in Mississippi, that both sides debate together. So they can't just get away with a talking point. They have to explain what they mean. It's entertaining, informative, and it's on 110 stations, and now on WOR 710 in New York.
That's great. So you have been writing, talking, organizing about the corrupting influence of money on politics for 40 years and the ability of big business interests to manipulate the system to their advantage. What is your take on Occupy Wall Street? Because that seems to be the essence of the message that they're trying to bring to people.
I mean, a lot of people I've read, the Christoph types, I disagree with. I'm not going to be a liberal who sermonizes to them. Very nice, but you should have, this is your agenda. You shouldn't use a tent. You should. It's terrific what they're doing. This country was obsessed with the only issue was deficits, deficits, deficits during a recession that Obama inherited because of Wall Street shenanigans and collapse. Finally, a group came together, and the reason they're so successful, it's metastasized to 900 cities around the world. It's way bigger than the Tea Party, though not in Congress, is they came up with a theme and a phrase that broke through. You've been in politics and in television. And I could say blah, blah, or you could say, we're the 99%. A, it sounds like I'm Spartacus from Kirk Douglas. And B, it puts the wealthiest Americans whose real income has tripled in 30 years while their taxes have been cut by half. I love wealth. I wish I was wealthier. Some of my family members are. The point isn't soak the rich. The point is somebody has to pay for the battleships and the food stamps. So and by saying Occupy Wall Street and doing it, instead of creating a big business day, which Ralph Nader and I did in 1980, same subject, we did it, seminar, excitement, gone. They are there, located in Wall Street, they're not going anywhere, and they've changed the conversation in the country.
Okay, so they've raised public consciousness. They have started a national, perhaps an international debate. Then what?
Abraham Lincoln, who you and I almost knew, famously said you can do nothing without public opinion, everything with it. And so the predicate to any kind of public change is that the public buys in. And so when polls are taken now by disinterested sources, by 3-1, the public says they're right, that we should have a surtax on people with $1 million plus incomes, because again, we have deficits and we have to Keynesian spend money to get the economy going.
But that amount of money, while it may be significant, is certainly not going to solve the country's economic problems.
First of all, this show won't solve the country's economic problems, so why am I here? Which is a sarcastic way of saying, you know, if you end the Bush tax cuts and you go back to the Clinton tax rates, we're not talking confiscatory, it's 35 to 39%. Overall, $800 billion over a decade, which, you know, is not bad. But their critique is way more fundamental than just the tax rate. The system, the political and economic system, is rigged by money. Money shouts. So what do? Well, you know, look at the lobbying laws. You look at the Citizens United Supreme Court. A radical decision.
Radical decision.
Where 5 conservative justices, in part because Jews in Florida voted for Pat Buchanan in the famous stupid ballot, by 537 votes, ended up with Bush in the White House appointed two people who said for the first time in 100 years that big corporations can give unlimited amounts, now secretly, and spend it in campaigns. They're still not allowed for now to give it to a candidate. And so it's a radical change, and somebody had to say the only issue in America is not just deficits, which we can handle. We're a very rich country. China's buying our paper at 2%. So why are they giving us money? Because we're a relatively strong economy over time. They change the conversation, and we'll see next year if they can change politics and laws.
But you've talked about the megaphone of the wealthy that money gives them. You've talked about how they hammered home this message of deficit reduction in the absence of anything else. Where is the president? Why isn't the president out there with the bully pulpit rallying the country to a progressive point of view?
That's with all due respect, and I actually respect you and know you for a very long time. That's a great question as of September 6th. And I like Obama. I voted for him. He's much disparaged and slandered. But he was very anxious publicly. He would buy into the other side's point of view. Robert Frost once said, a liberal is someone who won't take his own side in an argument. On the one hand, on the other hand. And when he saw that the Republicans wouldn't deal, wouldn't compromise, and were only out to destroy him and slander him, September 7th, he spoke to the joint session, and he said, basically, these are patricians passing as populists. And what about the rest of us? I want tax cuts for average people, and others should pay their fair share like they did under Clinton when the economy was better. He is taking a empirically accurate and populist stand again and again. Pass this bill. We can't wait. Don't you want more jobs? What's wrong with putting construction people who are idle back to work on rebuilding our infrastructure? And then 10 days later, September 17th, coincidentally, Occupy Wall Street begins with no attention. And I'd say those two events have catalytically come together and have shifted the debate in America. So it's not all weird guys wearing tea bags off their hat, toting guns to rallies with often racist signs.
So there are a lot of moderates, independents, mostly I would say Democrats, some Republicans as well, who nonetheless feel a hollowness about the positions that Democrats take on certain issues. And I want to ask you three specific questions.
Okay,
with three different topics, and because I want to know what Democrats should be saying to those voters in the middle. Number one, and this goes back to the origin of the Tea Party to begin with. So let's take as a given that the banks manipulated the system and they eased up regulations and they pumped a lot of easy credit to people. And I'll even posit that there's a substantial percentage of the public who were hoodwinked into taking on mortgages that they couldn't afford and didn't deserve. But there were also a substantial number of people who took advantage of that easy credit, knowing that they couldn't afford it, knowing that they were taking that money and using it to buy trips, vacations, cars and TVs rather than improving their homes. And why should I, the homeowner next door who didn't take on that risk, why should I be bailing them out?
The economy lost $7 trillion starting in September 15th of 08. And your home values, and mine, and millions of others, assuming we're still where we are and where these taxpayers are on the hook, has lost value completely. Our children aren't getting work. So if one person willingly makes a bet and it doesn't pay off, the big short, and they lose, of course you don't bail them out. That's capitalism. 3 million people have lost their homes. 9 million may lose their homes because Bush Cheney had an economic policy that collapsed, deregulation of the banking sector, they looked the other way. And so what's in the interest not of one person? That's hard luck, that's capitalism, and then you give them food stamps if they're hungry. What's in the interest of the whole economy now? And we have to have some, like Europe is trying to do with Greece, right, some kind of negotiated agreement on foreclosure forgiveness to help everyone.
So question number 2, immigration. Let's do all the hot buttons if we can in the first half. I believe in diversity. My grandparents came to this country. My wife is an immigrant. We played by the rules. We wait our turn. We qualified. Some families had to wait decades to be able to come or not come at all. When did toleration of people who break the rules, who come here, overstay their visas, or sneak into the country, when did that become the equivalent of supporting diversity in this country?
When Reagan supported amnesty in '86. In other words, I'm using a conservative icon who said, Ken Fisher is right. That seems a little unfair, but this is not an absolute. There's some absolutes. You don't kill, you don't rape. And then there are judgment questions. Fair press, free trial. What if they collide? You balance. There are 12 million illegals in this country, and a lot of them are kids who didn't sneak across the border with knowledge, and they're in school. So in Alabama, kids are not going to public schools. They're staying home, and then bad things happen because they're afraid that they'll be caught and their parents will be kicked out because of a probably unconstitutional law in Alabama against immigrants. Conclusion, Kennedy, until McCain got political, a path to citizenship where you don't just give them something. You know, they have to learn English, they have to pay back fees and taxes, and over time they become American citizens, because otherwise you're dealing with an entire class of people who are in the Netherlands, not citizens, not foreigners, and that's not good for anybody.
I'm going to come back to question number 3 when CityWide continues right after this.
Hi, I'm Matthew Goldstein. November is CUNY month, and a great time to visit CUNY campuses in all 5 boroughs. Learn why more CUNY students than ever are winning national awards and scholarships. Our 24 colleges and professional schools are holding open houses for you. Meet world-class faculty. Ask about financial aid. The time to start working on your future is now. Visit cuny.edu/CUNY month.
Welcome back to CityWide. We're speaking with Mark Green. So before the break, I was asking you some questions, sort of what moderates are thinking, why they're not. There's something wrong with what they're hearing from the Republicans and the Tea Party, but they're not quite there yet with the Democrats. So I've got one more to ask you. I believe in the right of collective bargaining. Nobody wants sweatshop conditions, but you'd be hard-pressed to find any New Yorker and most Americans who think that public employees work under sweatshop conditions. And instead of making a social justice argument the way unions have traditionally done, the argument of many public employee unions basically comes down to politicians, be afraid of us. Give us what we want or we will hurt you. We have more resources than you do. We will come after you electorally. And they don't even go through the pretense that there's any merit to it. So how can Democrats continue to justify public employees getting better working conditions than most other Americans?
Well, I don't think the problem in this country is a teacher or a sanitation worker earning respectively $50,000 and $30,000 a year. So it's not only sweatshops, it's income. And the only way you can figure out in a marketplace a fair income is if management labor negotiate. Now, this is a big issue in Wisconsin and Ohio. And when this show is aired, we will know the results of the Ohio referendum, where a conservative governor, John Kasich, basically took away collective bargaining rights of public employees. And the employees and the public have a repeal proposition on the ballot, which is passing by 20 percentage points. So in this country, we have business and labor, and if labor didn't have these collective bargaining rights, then businesses who don't have to picket, don't have to shout at Occupy Wall Street, they just give money and send lobbyists and buy economists, would run everything. And this is fair and will and should continue.
So at a breakfast recently, Mayor Bloomberg, who you know well and have had occasion to think about a lot, said that he thought that the cause of the mortgage crisis was Congress forcing the banks to lend people who couldn't afford those mortgages, and it wasn't the banks taking advantage of loopholes in the law. Do you agree with that?
First of all, your skeptical look conveys all we have to in ideological television. It's not whether I agree with it. He should read all the 10 leading books on it, like Michael Lewis's book. He should read the Federal Commission report of the controller from Angelides, who said the opposite. Mike Bloomberg is a smart, engaging guy who is the quintessential Wall Street big businessman, mayor of New York. He got to be mayor for a variety of reasons that I'm not allowed to go into, but his money was not irrelevant. He didn't think spending $74 million, or last time $108 million, was irrelevant. He didn't think, so that was related. I don't think he really represents what the city needs. It's not just a luxury city. There are like more than one borough. And I heard him like 2 years ago, pre-Rick Perry, say, I heard him say, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme, Bernie Madoff, is a crime that exploits people who are unaware. Social Security is a very good system. It's flawed. It works. Most popular. He said that. And so when he says that, when he turns a blind eye to the fact that Glass-Steagall was repealed, Wall Street went crazy with huge ratios of debt to equity, and they knew what they were doing, and it collapsed, and the rest is history. When he ignores that, he just shows that, you know, he is not leading the Occupy Wall Street, since he's the mayor of Wall Street in values.
Well, okay, so he's a busy guy. Maybe he doesn't have time to read all of those books.
No, one second. He's a busy guy who plays golf as he should. He's a smart guy. He has a belief system. I'm not saying it's evil. It's not that reflects a majority of New Yorkers. And if his poll numbers are now back to 40-40, it's only because, with no election in sight, we think, he spends millions of dollars in ads just to prop up his numbers. So he is the most powerful, unique mayor in world history. He's Berlusconi without the girls. And the money keeps him as high as he is, because otherwise he'd have a third term like Koch.
How do you think his third term is going? I guess we're about.
Well, it's going very badly, I think. And there was a really brilliant piece in the New York Times 2 Sundays ago. Third terms are hard because you don't have as much talent around you, and people are a little bored or weary of you. And his appointments to Chancellor and his deputy mayor, Kathy Black, were so indefensible and bizarre as to be almost imperial. And then the scandal at City Time. And now there's no one questions his personal integrity financially. And then there was the trial of the guy who Mike Bloomberg basically gave $1 million outside the campaign finance reporting system from personal funds. You know, you're supposed to raise money, if not, and then report it. So that didn't look or smell good, and it wasn't right. I think he's having a hard time. His big success has always been, he said, you know, test scores are up and education is reformed. We'll see if education is reformed, but the test scores were fudged. We'll see how often. It's just a fact. And his biggest success now has been tainted by questions about whether they spun the numbers.
Well, some people would say his biggest success was
and keeping crime down.
Well, keeping crime down, but nurturing the built environment of the city, the parks, the development, the things that allow New York City to grow, to attract resources, to attract the talent that the city needs to compete internationally.
I think that's fair. The city has done economically better than the country as a whole, relatively. Its unemployment rate was lower, and the best and the brightest are still attracted by the magnet of the city, culturally, socially, economically. Crime stayed low and got lower, and if the crime is up on the mayor's watch, he or she gets the blame, and they should get the credit under Ray Kelly, and they are getting the credit, although they're bumping up in some numbers.
I want to segue into a different aspect of emergency services. I had the opportunity to read the federal court decision about the fire department that was issued very recently that excoriated the mayor personally and his senior leadership, laid out a history of decades of discrimination in the fire department, and in fact cites a letter that you wrote in May, I believe, of 2001 to then Mayor Giuliani, calling for additional efforts to diversify the fire department. So I want to ask you two different questions. One is, what the hell is going on there, if you know? And second is, why was that a one-day story in the New York Times? Where were the public hearings? Where were the demonstrations? Where were the press conferences that would have followed if the same findings had been made while Rudy Giuliani was mayor?
That's a really interesting question. I think that there's never been a more powerful mayor, if not executive, than Mike Bloomberg, because he's not only the top elected person by definition, but he's about the wealthiest New Yorker. And so his contributions to not-for-profits and other candidates, his companies like Bloomberg LP and now Bloomberg Law and Bloomberg View, hold out the possibility that any journalist who writes about him, there aren't that many media companies now, could end up applying to work for him because he's going to be around a long time. Conclusion, he's locked down this city in terms of the normal criticism that Dinkins got from the mainstream press, that Giuliani got from the liberal press. The fire department has 7% black in a city that's 28% black. A little better, but not much Latino. For decades, it's an encrusted system. Bloomberg et al. Say they've tried to change the test to open it up. It hasn't worked. There's a disparate effect at the end that is not badly motivated, but is discriminatory in effect. And that judge said, that's it. I'm basically going to oversee this department until you integrate it and make it. Other big cities with similar minority populations had that reflected in their fire departments. Why not New York?
Well, where were the politicians? Where were the ambitious candidates for mayor in the next round? Where are the city council members who don't really care?
Well, I don't want to be self-serving. I did a report and a tough letter about this because the numbers were the numbers in about 2000 or 2001. And the Vulcans, black firefighters, have been litigating this for years, and they won.
Okay, so unless the mayor changes his mind again, unless Christine Quinn and the city council change their mind again, there will be an election in 2013. There will be openings for mayor and other important positions around the city. What are the qualities that you think the next mayor is going to need?
None of them can be Mike Bloomberg. And so whenever you elect someone new, Kennedy after Eisenhower, Giuliani after Dinkins, they're often the opposite, or let's try something different. We'll see what happens in 2012 presidentially. So the person will be a non-billionaire, obviously, who will be more of a middle-class person so they can emotionally and programmatically connect to people who work with their hands and blue collar, pink collar. And Bloomberg doesn't. He just can't connect to them.
So all the candidates, at the moment, all the Democratic candidates, they're all going to be out there pressing the flesh. You'll see them serving meals to seniors and doing all the things to create that.
What's interesting about all of them, there's no front runner. These are all long shots who are regular politicians. None of them are like from outside the system. Like Giuliani was outside the system. Henry George, 100 years ago, who was the second closest mayoral loss in the last century to mine, was out there. They're all working standard politicians. They're all at 15% or so. Anthony Weiner was a strong favorite before he couldn't run. And so somebody is going to get, two people are going to get a little above 30% and get in a runoff, and then who knows. And the other 3 or 4, however many end up running, will get between 15 and 20. And you don't know until they run. It's a different level. It's like of all the Heisman winners, less than half star in the NFL. Cam Newton, it's working. Others, not so good. And until they all rise up to this level of extra scrutiny, you can't really know. Anybody who says they think they know who the next mayor, who is the next mayor, doesn't know.
My thanks to Mark Green, host of the nationally syndicated radio program, Both Sides Now. I'm Ken Fisher. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWide.